Hey everybody, Bill Tucker here. Hope you're having a great morning/day/afternoon/evening/night. Recording these at night, so I figure I might as well include all of the different day stages. Are you somebody who enjoys a good challenge? I mean, do you kick everything up to the hardest possible difficulty and really love digging into a challenging game and not only getting everything you can out of it, but breaking down those barriers and feeling the exhilaration of completing something really hard? That satisfaction of a job well done. Are you somebody who lowers everything to easy, for a more casual experience? Less friction because maybe you don't have time to beat your head against a wall on a boss for hours on end. Maybe you get frustrated easily or even angry, and you don't need that kind of problem or trigger in your video game. Maybe you just think these are for fun. I just want to have a great time going through the game as quickly as I can and move on to the next. Or are you Mr. or Mrs. Normal? Just experience the game as the developer intended with no extra ups or downs or changes necessary. There's no right answer to this question. This is all extremely subjective because difficulty is subjective. What's easy for me is hard for my 5-year-old, right? But it does seem to dominate a lot of the video game conversation, especially when Metroid Dread was released earlier this year. On today's episode of A Gamer Looks at 40, we're going to look at Metroid Dread, and it's not a retro game, I agree, but it's retro-esque. It's retro in style, and it's retro in its difficulty. It's a relatively unforgiving game that requires you to really learn it as you play it. There's no easy way out of Metroid Dread. So we're going to use Metroid Dread as a starting point for 3 conversations with 3 people. And then next week, we're going to have a big old conversation with one that kind of encapsulates everything we're talking about here. It's a 2-parter once again, so strap in for that. We start with Blue Williams. If you've never listened to this show before, she's amazing. Writer's View, spelt all weird, on Twitter. Check out the show notes. You can find her Twitter there. Very entertaining person, very clever, and very, very good at doing this whole podcast microphone thing. Very happy to have her back on the show. She talks about her opinions on difficulty and how that should be handled from a development perspective. Spoiler alert, her favorite game is Hollow Knight. So you may see where she's going with it from there. But we use Metroid Dread as that starting point. And it also serves as my thesis statement for this topic. Let's jump on in this episode, very cheesily titled, Dreadfully Difficult. Another topic I was kind of mulling over about because, again, Red and I are going to talk about the topic of video game difficulty using kind of Metroid Dread as a kind of for context for that. You recently completed Metroid Dread. Right. I recently purchased it. So I watched, I think I played like the first 10, 15 minutes and then I was like, I have to do editing. I can't sit here and play. Must do editing. So editing one out a couple days ago. But what's your opinion on, how does difficulty in does Metroid Dread, is it too difficult? Is it easy, too hard? What's your opinion on it?
Metroid Dread is a difficult game. Prepare yourself.
Okay.
However,
now,
being a retro gamer, it is not a difficulty that you should be unfamiliar with.
Okay.
The first time you go up against most of the bosses, they will absolutely wipe the floor with you. You are going to have to work. You're going to have to play them again and again and again. You're going to die, but eventually you're going to learn the patterns. All the bosses are extremely fair. Everything is extremely fair in Metroid Dread, with one tiny little asterisk that we'll probably get to in a second. But as far as the bosses go, it's like it's good old-fashioned platforming and learn the patterns and do it.
And it's interesting you say that it's fair, because that's always the big litmus test for me is it can be hard, But as long as it's fair and I look at that and I can say, okay, there's a solution here that I just don't know.
Right.
So what's the solution here? What's the answer to this problem that I've been presented with? Where a lot of times games are just unfair. You know, they're just like, especially older retro games where there was like, okay, how am I supposed to know XYZ was supposed to make, 1, 2, 3 happen? Like there's no way I would have known
and
that.
And the lousy hit detection and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Right. Is it hard like Hollow Knight hard, which I know is your favorite game?
No, it is way easier than Hollow Knight.
Interesting. Okay.
It's also much smaller than Hollow Knight.
Sure. Yeah, Hollow Knight's pretty sprawling.
Yeah, Hollow Knight, I'm currently on a second playthrough trying to get my platinum of Hollow Knight. And awesome. I finished the game in about 25 hours.
That's a long time for a game like that.
Yes, the first time I played it, I took 55 hours. So, so if you want to go compare initial playthrough to initial playthrough, I had 55 hours in Hollow Knight, and Metroid Dread I did in just under 14. So. Wow.
Yeah, I probably won't be able to finish it in time for the talk next week, but I'm interested in that. The idea of being fair is really encouraging to me because I can deal with hard. Mm-hmm. So I'll put it to you. Is Metroid Dread the kind of game that should have that, or should any game have that? What's your opinion on that kind of thing?
Okay, I will say personally, I am against difficulty sliders in any form.
Okay,
I think that there is value in getting your ass kicked. I think there is value in coming across something that seems insurmountable and buckling down and doing it anyway. I think there is value in working hard for a reward. I don't like the idea, just on a personal level for me, I don't like the idea of being able to take an easy road and receive something I didn't earn. But as I said, that's me. If for games that have easy settings, I've never used them. I always play on the normal difficulty, and then if I'm not feeling challenged, I'll go to the harder difficulty. But people play games for different reasons. That's why games like Stardew Valley and Animal Crossing exist. And I am so bored by those games because I want a challenge. I just don't want to sit here and have a cat talk to me or whatever it is you do in those games. I don't know. It feels like there's nothing to do in those games because there's no challenge. So obviously there's so many types of gamers in the world. They go to games for so many different things.
Exactly.
So I can see why some people would say, hey, like you said, I want to see the end of this game. I'd like a difficulty slider, and far be it from me to tell them how they can and cannot play. The other side of that is that personally, I would rather preserve the creative integrity and the autonomy that creators have over their games. So, if the FromSoft devs don't want to put a difficulty slider in there because that's not what they go for. That's not what they want to make. They want to make games that are hard as balls, and that's what their audience wants. Then they should be able to do that.
I agree 100% with that. My feeling on it personally is, while I don't think any developer should be forced to put a slider in there or a difficulty level for exactly the reasons you stated. Mm-hmm. But boy, oh boy, would it be great if you did. Gee whiz. It would just be lovely if you did that. But I would never force a developer and say, or mandate you'd have to have that. That's just my take on it, though. I think, to your point, people go to games for different reasons. I don't go to games to be... I have a certain level of difficulty that I'll deal with. I've never bumped a game up to hard. I've knocked them down to easy if it gets too much for me and it's just too much time tax. Mm-hmm. I very rarely I don't think I've ever bumped the game to hard. I start at normal and I do everything I can to play it normal. Unless it's completely insurmountable, then I'll drop it down. But that's actually kind of rare. Usually normal's a perfectly fine place for me to play.
Yeah.
I just wish developers would think about that, because people do want to experience the world building and the graphics and the characters and all the awesome stuff they built. But when you make difficulty this kind of like this 10 pole, like this pole in the ground,
Yeah.
no, we must be hard. That's one of your ethics, I guess. But
Yeah. Well, I mean, consider fighting games. Fighting games have an enormous barrier to entry because you have to memorize and so many moves, and not only memorize the 1,000 button combinations, but you also have to memorize the timing of it. And if that's your thing, that's your thing. In recent fighting games, they have, like auto combo features and stuff like that. I like fighting games, but I don't have time for that. My brain's not big enough to store that many combos in it. So,
right.
If I'm going to just play through the campaign myself at home, sure, I'll use the auto combo features. But I would never go online and try to play other people using those kind of features. That just, it's not fair. It's not the same. I haven't put in the work. I don't deserve to win.
Totally agree with that. That's a totally different story. If you're playing online, multiplayer, competitively, that's a different story, because now you're competing against another person, and the point of competition is fair play and a level playing field, in which your skills can be showcased against another person. Totally different. But on a single player experience in a fighting game, they usually, I mean, Street Fighter had little stars. How hard do you want to make this for yourself? Providing the opposing view to Blue is Andrew Craig. And it's not too opposing. I think the heart is there. But Andrew definitely has a different opinion on how developers should be handling difficulty and what they should be providing to their gamers. And his is a very interesting perspective because he loves challenge. He thirsts, he hungers for a really good challenge in the video game. His main gaming goals are 100%ing games and getting platinums. As of this recording, he has over 270 platinums on the PlayStation Network for just PS3, 4, and 5 alone. And by the time this releases, he could have 20 more. That's just what the man does. So to hear his side of the story and his perspective is just really interesting, and it turned out to be an excellent conversation. So let's dive in. Have you played, I'm assuming you've played Metroid Dread?
Yes.
Okay. That game is notoriously challenging. And again, according to everything I heard, I started it 2 days ago. I got like 45 minutes in and I said, no, I have to edit. Stop playing, and went to edit. What was your opinion on it as far as that challenge goes? And again, coming from a person who loves a good challenge.
It took me 3 days to 100%.
I don't know. I had a funny feeling that you were able to just eat it up. So you didn't find it terribly challenging at all, or at least by your metric.
It was challenging, but the game does a really smart thing. And I love that they did this, because I feel like they were talking specifically to people like me, which is one of the loading screen, little text things that comes up.
Right.
Is every attack can be dodged. I heard that. Have to look for the pattern.
I heard that. Yeah. I heard someone else mention that. Yeah.
And they're absolutely right.
Interesting. How interesting.
Everything can be avoided in that game. You just have to find the pattern in it.
It's funny because I ran into my first EDI, I think it was, or whatever, the ED sections, I think they're called. And first few times I just get destroyed. I'm running through it, trying to outrun it. And then finally, I think last time I played it, I was thinking, okay, what is this character doing? Like, what is this enemy doing? Clearly they're stalking. I don't have a sneak verb. Like, there's no verb for me to kind of like sneak around and hide, as far as I can tell. So I'm just going to have to go through it, and it's always going to follow. So I felt like I was starting to kind of decode a little bit, but I'm going to go into it with your mindset. Really try to just decode what the game is trying to do and then solve the problem that way. I'm literally going to do that. That sounds like a really interesting exercise. And what could be frustrating, because again, beating my head against a wall numerous times isn't, terribly fun for me. But I think that idea of decoding is really interesting and good. I'm going to give that a go.
Yeah, it's a really impressive game, and if you start to feel frustrated with the boss, just look at when you're getting hit and how you can avoid those moments. Because for a lot of people, it seems like I've watched a few streamers online playing it for the first time, and they get to a boss and they keep getting hit in the same attack phase. And figuring out how to avoid that means that you're just not getting hit anymore.
Right. And then you can get your shots in when you get them. That's interesting. Yeah, that's cool.
And take your time.
Yeah, that's a very good thing. Point to just take your time. It's not going anywhere. The game. Yeah, I like that. I'm going to apply that to this particular because I'm really trying to divorce myself or stop leaning on all of the tools outside the game to solve them, like walkthroughs and such. I'm really trying to lean into the games as designed and say, okay, I want to experience this as designed by a developer, and not use a walkthrough and not use a cheat or not use an exploit. Just figure it out, right? So I'm really going to try to do it Dread because, again, I want to have that little more old school experience. It's very easy to just kind of pop online and say, how do I do this? But with Dread, you have to do it, right? It sounds like there's really no cheat or workaround. You just have to figure it out and do it.
Yeah, as far as getting through the game itself, yeah. The only thing that cheats or walkthroughs can really help with is getting all of the collectible stuff.
Right.
But even then, you still have to do it. And right. I can think of one in particular that was such a headache mechanically.
Okay. Just a challenging one.
Yeah, just because they ask you to pull off 3 or 4 things that are really hard to pull off, one right after the other.
Kind of like one of those, what you need to do, but it's just really hard to actually
execute on it. Yeah.
Well, I'm not a big thing on 100%ing. Another thing I'm learning is to be okay with that non-optimal playthrough. Just be okay. I didn't get everything. Okay, cool. Or if I feel like I'm underpowered or don't have enough resources to take on a boss, well, I better figure out how to, like you said, not take damage because I'm not going to be able to deal as much, or et cetera, et cetera. So just trying to divorce myself from that is something I'm trying to do as someone who's older, who maybe has less time to do it. But I don't know. I just feel like it's just a more enjoyable experience to kind of push against that friction as opposed to just eliminate it completely.
Yeah, well, I think more people need to be okay with the idea of walking away. And I realize how ridiculous that is coming from me.
Sure.
But I think if it gets you to that point where you're that frustrated, I have never in my life thrown a controller. I have occasionally set one down and gone outside for a cigarette because I need to, but that's about as bad as it gets. But I think a lot of people take it way too personally.
I think the issue with that is, and that's, I've thought about this for my own self, because I don't think I've ever thrown a controller, but I've gotten angry, and not to get too much inside my brain, but anger is something I struggle with. I just deal with, I have a quick fuse in life. Right. So when it comes to games, which is supposed to be enjoyable and a fun experience, I have had those moments where I get really frustrated. I think personally, I think a lot of it has to do with just identity. Like if you failed at a game, I think a lot of people's brains immediately go to I'm a failure, which can trigger that kind of anger response, right? Because anger is just a response to a mental stimuli. So I think that's what happens. I think people just say, I failed at this over and over again. Hence, I am a failure. I'm no good. I'm worthless. Where the answer is, well, no, you just didn't do well at this thing. That's not who you are as a person. And I think that's where that separation lies, honestly.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I am about to have a conversation with another person about video game difficulty. You brought up From Software as a game that likes to punish. You, as someone who appreciates a good challenge, do you think there's a point where challenge could be too much? Is From Software games, or are From Software games too much challenge? What do you think about that?
For me personally, yes. I don't like feeling punished by a game.
Gotcha. And you feel like,
I recognize that there's an audience for that. And just because it isn't for me doesn't mean it shouldn't exist.
Absolutely. No question.
There are games like For instance, I'm trying to think of a good recent one, but like say the PS4 Spider-Man game that came out.
Yeah.
Or even better, because this argument happened a lot around this game, is The Last of Us Part 2.
Sure. Okay.
Should there be a super easy mode for people who just want to experience the narrative? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care that you want a challenge. If you want a challenge, absolutely ask for a super challenging mode, but don't punish other people for not getting the same thing out of the thing that you do.
Yeah. I do agree with that. Yeah, go ahead.
It's such a weird idea to me that somebody would say, you aren't really a fan of this thing. You don't really understand this thing because you don't play it the same way that I do.
So to that point, do you think developers should be including difficulty, or is it something that people should be aware of what they're getting into before they buy a game? Because my big thing is, and this may sound kind of cheesy, but let's say for Metroid Dread, for example, it's a pretty decent example. There's no difficulty settings, there's no sliders, you play it, that's the game. And it is challenging for a lot of people. So let's say we have a mom who looks on the Amazon wish list, or looks at the Target gift guide, sees Metroid Dread on there. Their 11-year-old plays video games. Cool, let's get them this Metroid Dread game. 11-year-old pops it in, starts playing, and cannot get past the first Edie stage for whatever reason, because he's 11, right? It's probably not for him. And boom, there goes his Christmas, right? We've all been in this situation as kids. We get a game, we hate it. Boom, that's my game for the year.
Yeah,
right?
Well, we talked last time about how that's how my experience with The Legend of Zelda started.
Exactly, right. But you persevered by doing something amazing. You persevered. A lot of people probably wouldn't. Should Metroid Dread have a difficulty setting for the player that may not be as adept as somebody else? Or,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because not only is it about is this kid as good at video games as me? Because that's an unfair comparison. But it's also, what about all the people who have mental disabilities, physical disabilities? There are all sorts of different things that can keep a game from being completable by people. And
Sure.
Anytime we can tear down the gates and open that pathway to everybody, the better it's going to be for everybody.
I agree with that too. And I think it's a lot of people do liken difficulty to accessibility. And I think there are some parallels, and I oscillate between this, right? Because I think accessibility is, let's stop using colors for button prompts because people are colorblind. That literally is nothing they can do about that. They can't, work at it and get more color, get less colorblind. Yeah. You know what I mean? Or
they can't grind to improve that physical part of themselves.
Exactly. Right. People who who are deaf and who can't hear, there should be, every game should have subtitles if something is spoken, or the ability to turn those on. Like we have to have moved past that era of gaming where that wasn't a thing, right? And that's more of accessibility, right? Difficulty, you could argue, you could work at it to improve, but there's the other side of it saying, well, what if you really don't have the maybe physical abilities, or I'll even say maybe mental faculties that allow you to do that, right? So you could argue that difficulty falls in the same line as accessibility.
I definitely would. And what I think every game should be is every game should be released where the normal difficulty is what the developer intended this game to be.
Yeah.
So normal is just the default. This is the way they designed the experience to be. And if that means that normal difficulty is unusually difficult, it's because they wanted that game to be a really difficult game, right, or to feel really punishing. But you should be able to change it to easier so that you can experience the world of the game, or harder if that's what you're really after.
I would never force a game developer to put in difficulty, but man, it'd be great if you did.
Developer, yeah, well, I mean, that's sort of my attitude, is the fact that, I believe The Last of Us 2 shipped without any difficulty-related trophies.
Ooh, okay.
Which was fantastic, because one of the truly crushing things for me was going through the original Uncharted on crushing difficulty was painful. And I got a lot out of the experience, but it also, I could see it very easily, somebody who isn't me coming out of that saying, I hate these guys.
Right. Can't stand
and to not limit somebody by saying you have to complete it based on our benchmark makes it feel a little more doable.
Yeah.
And with From Software games, people can make the argument that, well, those games are designed to be hard and they're designed to be challenging and it's worth it because the story is so great. If the story's that great, the gameplay should facilitate more people experiencing it.
That's a very eloquent way of putting that. It's because I want to experience all the other things that are great in that game. Again, the story, the atmosphere, the weapons, the experience. Like there's lots of stuff in there. But since From Software says no, you know, one of our tentpole, what's the word I'm looking for? Virtues, or one of our tentpole aspects of our game is difficulty. These are hard games. They're challenging games. It's what these are. Like this is what we've decided as creative people to make this a huge bullet point in what these games are. You know, that does limit that prevents people from enjoying the rest of that experience. It just does. And to not give people the ability to just kick down the timing a bit. If I put it on an easy or medium or even like a slider, like you'd find in like a sports game, you know, boom, a little bit, I'm sure I've been fine. It's just something about the timing I wasn't getting right. And, and I put in what I thought was an appropriate amount of time to figure it out. It wasn't like I said, oh, forget it after 2 seconds. I put in hours trying to figure this thing out. I just couldn't quite get it. So anyway, I think it's an interesting conversation. I just wish people would be a little more sensitive or empathetic towards people who really just can't. And instead of saying, well, screw you guys, you can't, tough. I don't, again, my identity is wrapped up in how I'm playing hard games. So I guess you have to, I don't know. It's a weird thing.
It's gatekeeping.
Yeah.
It's very much gatekeeping. I have a friend recently who was playing, did you play Kena Bridge of Spirits?
I did not.
Fantastic game. Really beautiful. Great first effort from Ember Studios. Like that's their first game and it looks as polished as a studio that's been around since the PS2 era. One of the things that he realized, though, he was playing on normal and he just could not get through the bosses. He was spending half an hour to an hour just trying to make his way through one of the bosses. And it started to taint his experience of the game, where he was starting to dislike the game based on that. And I said, well, why don't you kick the difficulty down? And he goes, I hadn't really thought of that, but okay. Kick the difficulty down to easy from normal. Start blowing through the bosses. And what he started doing was he found the gameplay was too easy on easy and the bosses were too hard on normal. So he would play through most of the game on normal difficulty, and then when he'd get to a boss, he'd swap it to easy. And it went from tainting his experience of the game because of its difficulty to helping him tailor the gameplay to his skill level.
Yeah.
And he ended up having a great time with it because of that.
And at the end of the day, isn't that what I would think a developer would want? For you to have a great time with their game, right? At a level of challenge that you think is appropriate for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Again, I have a friend who puts everything, and this is just him, it's just his thing. He puts everything on easy. He wants as little friction as possible in his games. He's a podcaster, so he plays a lot of games. So he needs to get them done quick, which is part of it. But that's his thing. I don't agree with it.
There's nothing wrong with that.
But there's nothing wrong with it. Play it how you want to play it. If you want to, play how you want to play it.
If that's how he gets his jollies playing games, so be it. Yep. It doesn't affect my experience, so what do I care?
Exactly. And that's one of the weird things I think it all comes down to identity. You know, people I think want to think that they were able to take on a challenge other people could not, but don't think to realize that just because other people can't do that challenge doesn't lessen the fact that you were able to succeed. Just because not everybody platinums a game doesn't mean your accomplishments are any less, right? Or more. It's incredible that you've platinum 276 games. It's absolutely incredible. I think that's an incredible achievement. I never will do that.
And most people never will, and it doesn't make me special. It just helps me sleep at night.
Yeah.
Because I'm one of those people who would lay awake going like, if I just put another half an hour into this thing, I think I can get this done. And I can't do that to myself. I'm obsessive compulsive enough that that's the way that I have to do things. But I don't hold it against other people.
Of course not. Of course not. And if someone wanted to just play the game, get to the ending and move on, okay, cool. I hope you enjoyed it. I know it's a weird thing. And again, I would never force a developer to do it, but I would really, really love it if you did. Could you consider it, please? Because a lot of people could more people could enjoy the game that you've created.
Well, and it means that they can, the potential user base opens up even further.
Right.
Because granted, making an easy mode for The Last of Us Part 2 isn't going to help them suddenly be kid-friendly, because that's not a kid-friendly game.
Right.
But it does mean that there are a lot of adults who otherwise wouldn't get to experience it. Like, I don't know if you read that. There was a story on Kotaku earlier this week about an elderly couple who sought out help on Craigslist for The Last of Us Part 2.
Huh.
And had somebody answer them, and he's been tutoring them in how to play video games.
Oh, that's cool.
And that wouldn't be possible if difficulty in all games was, held behind this gate of difficulty.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's a really cool story. I have to read that. And rounding out our virtual panel is Joe Coiro. If you've never met him or listened to this show before, he's amazing. He's my best friend since 3rd grade, and he's a man of wisdom and insight and occasional insanity. I don't think he'd be offended to hear that come from my mouth. He actually has a very interesting perspective, though, when it comes to this topic, because he deals with an accessibility issue. He has a physical issue that prevents him from enjoying games like everybody else can. And it's a very common one, but it's also, I think, a good perspective to end with, because he would actually make use of a lot of the things we're discussing today. We also attempt to provide a basic solution to the difficulty problem, and then discuss why it may not be so easy for people to just look it up on Kotaku if they want to find out if games are easy or hard. Let's listen in. I gotta ask you something, Joey. Being someone who is colorblind, are you completely colorblind, or is it just certain shades? I can't remember.
No. It's so there's phases. There's phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4.
Okay.
And phase 5 is that's the worst, because those are people that they see no color. It's the absence of color. They just see black, white, and different shades of
so scary
of gray. I know. Yeah, it's some sort of a Sin City movie that you're living in. That's the worst. I don't know anyone with that severe. But like anything, there's some people just confuse one color shade, one palette. So that's obviously phase 1. You have these people that have purple and blue. And then the more you're confused, the higher you go on the scale. So I'm the highest without going to black and white.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I confuse browns and greens. I confuse reds and orange. I confuse blue and purple. Some yellows with orange, depending on the shade. Yeah, they're all my rods and cones don't. They see them as completely different colors. But there's corrective lenses they have now. There's surgeries that they have to correct it. I'm not going to do that. I mean, if to each their own. If somebody wants to do that, they can.
Yeah. But you've lived with it for your entire life, so it's not. I'm assuming it's not a big deal for you.
No, it's
just the way it is.
It's my world. It's how I see my world. So now at 41, I'm not going to change.
No, I mean,
imagine someone saying, "Bill, we're going to give you laser treatment to see proper," and proper is purple sky and orange grass.
Yeah,
that would be shocking to you. That was intriguing and maybe even a little curious as you'd be like, well, let's see what the world looks like that. But you wouldn't want that forever. You've lived 40 years seeing the world one way. You've fallen in love with the world that way. So even if it's wrong, and I know I see wrong, it's incorrect, but I'd rather live like me.
No, I get that.
I gotta be me. I'm gonna start crooning. Some Sammy Davis Jr. I gotta be me. What else can I be?
Well, I want to bring this to gaming a little bit, because that is a bit of a topic of accessibility. For the longest time, and even nowadays, you play Super Metroid, and you have to go through.
That's a hard game to play if you're colorblind. Oh man, is that hard?
The green door is for super missiles, and the red door is for missiles, and the blue one's for blasters. Did that cause a problem for you in those days,
Sure.
or was it?
Very
or did
much.
you just identify them based on what they were supposed to be?
No. It's. I guess what is eye catching to somebody else may not be to another gamer. Like if you have, like a hard yellow with brown or green, a whole level of that type of palette, that may not be appealing to you. And oftentimes that happened to me as a gamer. I couldn't stand going through levels just because I didn't. Sometimes it was confusing, or items would blend in with the background because of color. I just got to get through this level. I got to get through this world. I can't wait to get to the other world. In Super Mario World, the Woods world, I forget which world it is. You remember the Woods world?
Yeah, it's like
that one. What the hell was that called?
That's the fifth world. It's the Woods Maze. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Forest of Feelings, whatever the hell it was called. So, like that was, oh God, I couldn't stand that world. I couldn't just. There's just so much green and brown.
Right.
And,
it's all green and brown. Yeah.
No, and that's not to a colorblind person. No. The Jets had this just a couple of years ago. They played a game and they had to apologize to a bunch of colorblind people because they were doing like a Thursday night thing, and like they played I think it was the Bills, and the Bills were in all red and the Jets were in all green. I couldn't watch the game.
Wow.
I couldn't watch the game. I said I can't. I don't know what the hell's going on. I don't know who's who. It was awful. Terrible experience. Google it. You could say Jets, Bills, colorblind. That's all you have to Google is those buzz terms, and you'll see it was a whole thing. And the league had to come out and apologize. And my friend who's a gamer said, "Wow, that's they don't really broadcast sports to a colorblind person." I said, "No, they don't make video games to a colorblind person either." And he's like, "That's true. I didn't think of that."
That's interesting. Wow, that's really interesting. I always wonder about that too, because nowadays we talk a lot about accessibility, and I think people confuse challenge, because the discourse, like Metroid Dread, perfect example.
Yes.
If you spend any time on Twitter, the discourse right now is difficulty, how this game is really hard and there's no difficulty settings. I have very strong opinions about this when it comes to difficulty settings. Not to get into a whole rant about it, but I don't think a developer should be beholden to make difficulty settings.
That's amazing. And I agree. I wholeheartedly agree.
But it would be lovely if you did.
Sure.
It'd be really, really
Why? The
neat.
game is hard? You've played this?
Well, I've not played Dread yet, but I've had a situation with Bloodborne is my example for this. I received Bloodborne as a gift for Christmas. It was on my list. Someone got it for me. I tried to play Bloodborne. I played that game in 2 sessions over the course of like 6 months in 2 tries. I think I played for like 4 hours on one session and like 6 on another. I never got past the first stage.
Oh my!
Never
the
once.
First stage?
I can't get out of it. I can't get it through my head. And there's no difficulty settings. You can't grind for experience. You can't grind for better weapons. You literally, the designers of the game build this initial area and this initial boss to teach you, hey, this is basically your entrance exam for the game. Like if you fail this course, you can't move on to the rest of the game. You have to
that's not
here.
that. No, that game shouldn't be released. That's terrible. That's not a game.
And I gave up. And all I can think of is like, I didn't spend any money on the game, so there's no personal stake for me. But imagine how crappy that would be if I spent $60 on this game, thinking, ooh, I want to experience the story and the graphics and the sound and the environments and the combat. All the great things, but since From Software has said no, challenge is one of our tentpole aspects, we're not putting in a difficulty. We are going to gatekeep is a hard word to say for
that's
that.
Dumb.
I just think that's really, really crappy for a developer to do.
You used a term there. What was the term you used?
Gatekeeping.
No, it was before that. I guess it was a term that you used to grinding, you said, or something?
Yeah, grinding. Like, like grinding out experience. Like just fight the same boss, same enemies over and over. Gain
I actually
points,
hate games. I loathe games like that. That actually there's no other way to know that a pitfall or a death or a challenge is imminent other than to die. Those like, oh, now you know. No, I think that's lazy. I think that's lazy gaming. And I know a lot of games like that. That's, I died here, so now I know the next time. That's silly. I don't like games like that.
It's poor design. It's also a lot of that's a holdover from the old arcade days when the idea was to steal quarters from children.
That's right, to pump quarters out of you, right.
And artificially extend the length of games. We don't need to do that now.
That's right.
And of course, game design, most games still do that, right? I actually posited this on Twitter that maybe we could have a very loose rating system for games for accessibility and challenge. Because a lot of people in my circle of retro gaming fans and gaming fans on Twitter especially will say, well, just look at reviews. Reviews will tell you if a game is hard or not.
Not really.
Well, there's one problem with that. Two problems. One, a critical examination of a game should not include difficulty because it's suggestive. My reaction time is much slower than a 20-year-old.
Yes.
Right? So what's easy for that person is hard for me.
That's right.
So now I can look at a game and judge if it's fair.
Correct.
If it's a fair challenge, if the design of the game, if my losses and wins feel earned, it doesn't feel cheap.
Right.
But I can't gauge difficulty. Why don't we put on the game package, hey, no adjustable difficulty settings?
That's right.
Boom. Now you know that if this is the game I'm going to get, if I'm not, now you have the information because you can't expect a mom whose son is 12 and sees Metroid Dread in the Amazon gift book, right? And says, oh, I want that for Christmas because that's the hot new game.
That's right.
She buys it. She doesn't know. All of a sudden, little Johnny comes home, pops the game in his Switch, and is just brutalized with no opportunity to turn down a difficulty, no chance to experience the game, and gets up disappointed.
See, we have
there's
those.
this Christmas.
You're right, and we have those people. We still have them in life.
Of course.
But the problem is those people are gamers now. They're gamers that are policing that, and we didn't have that growing up in the 80s. The CEOs and the executives at Sega and Nintendo, they were moms. They had no idea, so they were playing it through the first time. And I go as far as say that we need that. We need to go back to that because it was those people that policed that and realized. Look at Super Mario 2 as a perfect example. Super Mario 2, the one that they got in overseas, that game is so difficult. It's punishing.
Right.
And the Japanese culture, they're all about the religious culture. Everything's about self-discipline. That wasn't difficult for the children over there. But over here in America, the moms and the executives that played this, the dads, they were like, this game is too hard. And as a result, we got Doki Doki Panic, which is a classic. It's a classic. Right. That is the better Mario sequel. Let's be honest. So to your point, I think that the people pulling the strings right now, they're not neophytes like they were in the 80s. They're experienced, savvy gamers. So to them, difficulty is very different than, to your point, a child picking up Metroid Dread for the first time and saying, no way, this game's impossible.
And I do hope that, and I also keep an eye on that, no pun intended, when it comes to accessibility, because you can make the argument that difficulty is accessibility. I like separating the two because I think difficulty settings are nice to have as long as you let people know. That's my whole thing with that is, if you don't want to give players the option, then let them know it's not there before they spend
full
money
disclosure.
on it.
That's it. Bill. Absolutely.
Listen, if I walk into a bar, right? If I walk to an establishment and it turns out to be a bar, I know that because there's taps and there's bar signs. Like I can see, using the visual cues of a bar.
That's right.
I know where I'm at, and I can make that decision to turn around and walk out.
Yes.
Without spending any money.
Correct.
But if I walked into a bar and it looked like a McDonald's, and all of a sudden someone's pouring me a pint of beer, like whoa, I can't drink that. Well, sorry, no refunds.
That's right.
Sorry.
That's an excellent
Here's
metaphor.
your beer. You can throw this out the window if you like. I don't know what you want to do with it, but I don't have, I need information to make these decisions.
That's
and telling people to just go online and look it up. A lot of people in our society still can't do that. A lot of people in our society have very little access to internet. And you may say, well, then they shouldn't be playing video games or shouldn't be spending money on games.
Yeah.
Well, maybe their kid wants one because that's what they give them, but they don't have high-speed internet, right? Or we forget, I think, as a lot of people, again, in our circles who play games and have disposable income for that, there's a large swath of this country that is very rural with no infrastructure for internet.
You're right.
Again, they may have a dad or a mom who's at home on the one computer all day. They're not thinking about the review, and they want to give their kids a video game system. Hey, let's pick up a Nintendo Switch and Metroid Dread at Target, right? They don't know. And then again, like they bring it home for their kids and some kid's brutalized and his Christmas is ruined. Now, again, this is not lifeblood type stuff. We're not talking about food and water and necessities. But that sucks.
No,
that's a really
entertainment and
crappy
recreation
thing.
Absolutely goes. Bill, 3-4 years ago, I traveled the whole country on business for a company I used to work with, and I don't want to get too political here, but I visited these rural places that you're talking about. A lot of the more pastoral places, if you will, of America. I couldn't believe it, Bill. I couldn't believe it. It was truly like going into a time machine. And I would tell people, where are you going? I'm going to, Kenosha, Wisconsin. I'm going to Buchanan, Michigan. And they're like, where? And it was, and you feel that way when you go there. You're like, wow, the way of life here is so different. And to your point, that absolutely has a cascading effect to the entertainment and the recreational values of families and children. Absolutely.
And and in my world in education software, I used to, this was a few years ago, we stopped doing this, but I used to do these things called site assessments. So when a school district purchased our program, I would have to reach out to their technology person and give them a survey of like, what's your internet look like? Can your district support our platform, our program over your network based on the amount of users you have and how many computers you have? And I collect information and say, oh no, you guys are fine because you guys have a gig connection, you have 50 kids working on it, you're fine. Don't worry about it. If they weren't fine, they'd be approved to purchase what they call a caching server, which basically takes our entire program, all our content, puts it on this server, and they can stick it in their network and pull directly from that as opposed to going out to our servers, saves them a lot of bandwidth. And I would hear stories of one in particular I was talking about. It was in California, there was a Native American reservation that had these 6 small schools scattered throughout this reservation. And each one of them had their own internet connection. And these were old T1 lines. Everything was running off of T1 lines. And if you're not familiar with the T1 line, that's 1.5 megs per second. 1.5 megs per second. I get 10 times that on my phone on 4G. 1.5 megs.
And think about how many people are still doing this.
Still doing this. You know how many people are still dialing into AOL? You can still dial into AOL.
Millions.
I think last I saw that, I think there's 2 million people still dialing into AOL. I'm not kidding.
Insane.
It's
Do you know
insane.
what 2 million people is? That's incredible.
2 million? Yeah, 2 million. Think of the town that you live in. Depending where you live, it could be like 3 times the size of your town. Like
it's remarkable.
It's remarkable. In that Native American reservation, one school said to us, is it okay if the server that we bought turns off every night? Because our school runs off of a generator. And we turn off the generator every night for our one-room school, and that's going to reset the router every night. Is that okay? And you look at that and you're like, and again, I'm not saying that the internet is the end-all be-all for a lot of cultures. If it's a Native American reservation, maybe they don't need it, right? It's, that's a totally different story. But the point back to video games is that people don't have as much access to information as we like to think. They
Absolutely.
Really don't.
No.
And even though they have the information there, it's not. I mean, even with COVID here in Austin, they had to hand out laptops to every single student in Austin. And a lot of schools already were doing that, but a lot of the poorer districts or poorer areas didn't have that.
No, yeah.
And guess what was happening? What was happening was the parents who are no longer at work or lost jobs because of COVID, they're trying to look for jobs or do their work. They don't have a computer because they live in a poorer section of this lower income situation. Little Johnny comes home with a laptop. Sweet. Thank you. I'll use that to do my work so we can eat this week. But Dad, I have to do school lessons. Sorry. Sorry. You'll have to make it up someplace. Yeah. And that's the reality of it.
Make it about that.
Yeah. No, and it's Austin, the big area. They had to send out vans with Wi-Fi hotspots for certain parts of town that are underprivileged and underserved because they don't have internet. Well, here, we're going to drive out the Wi-Fi.
These are great reminders.
So the kids can log in and do their homework and do their schoolwork so they can graduate. I mean, I get up in arms when it comes to accessibility. This comes one of my things.
There's so many that don't even have the basic necessities. We're so blessed. These are great reminders.
Yeah. I mean, so to bring it back to video games and accessibility and letting people choose their own experience, at the very end of the day, a lot of gamers think, no, this is not necessary. You don't need it. My answer is, well, maybe for you. Mm-hmm. For you, you don't need it. If someone puts in a difficulty slider in Metroid Dread and you choose not to look at it, what is that hurting you?
Yeah.
Like, who is that hurting?
Oh, yeah.
It hurts nobody, mm-hmm. right?
That's right.
And again, I'm not gonna say mandate developers to make these things, but I don't know. How about we just do that because it's a nice thing to do, because it's a kind thing to do.
Exactly.
And lets others experience all the other aspects of a game that are important.
That's right.
Not just the challenge.
Where is the benevolence of it all? We want to make things as user friendly as possible. We do that in life. We make handicap accessible. Now, I'm not saying that someone's handicap that can't be the difficult level of a game, but if you're advertising your game to John, who's 42, and Mike, who's 12, then yes, to your point, you can't make that as rigid and non applicable regarding the difficulty level as these games are being released. It's irresponsible.
I think it is a little irresponsible, and I think it's also putting the focus on the wrong places. And I do want to also just make sure it's clear, I do think accessibility and difficulty are different things. Accessibility is like not relying on colors for keys, right? Making sure that there's two options, a color and a symbol or something, right? Mm-hmm. That way someone who is colorblind can differentiate easily. Mm-hmm. Making sure that there are always the ability to have subtitles. Always. No game should be released these days without the ability to turn on subtitles.
I agree.
The ability to turn up different sound options things that will help those with actual physical issues mm-hmm. to enjoy the game just like anybody else, right? That's that thing. But the difficulty, man, you can place in that same realm. You really can.
Absolutely.
My kid plays Mario Kart. He loves Mario Kart. I put on every easy option for him. Everything. Case in point with difficulty. My son, about a month ago, was playing Mario Kart. He had to go pee. He forgot to stop the game. So he just drops the controller, runs to the bathroom. It's just running on its own. I walk up the stairs to the sound of a toilet flushing. I look at the TV, and he's still in fourth place because he's playing on 50cc with all the easy stuff on. He can't fall off the track. It's accelerating for him. He's still in fourth place. He's not even playing the game. And he's in the top third of Mario Kart. And I looked at him like, man, I think I might be ruining this kid because now he thinks everything's easy. Games are they play themselves. Well, I don't have to do anything.
I did the same thing raising my kids. I thought the same thing too. Am I doing a disservice here? And the answer is no. The second they begin playing video games with their classmates, their peers, they understand that and they advance.
And it's funny, too, because I just today, before this conversation, I bought Will Yoshi's Crafted World for the Switch. And it's a great game. Colorful, fun, and it has a mellow mode and a classic mode. In the mellow mode, Yoshi has wings, and you can just float. You basically, if you're good enough, you can float through the entire stage by holding A, right? You can just float through the stage if you really wanted to. So I put it on for Will, and he's playing it. The first couple times, he just had a really hard time figuring it out. But today, he was jumping and moving okay.
Eureka!
And I'm like, ooh, okay, you're actually playing this game now. And he got to a part where he kept falling. And we all did this when we first learned how to butt stomp, like in Super Mario World, mm-hmm. right? Once you learn how to do that, you always do it by mistake. You find yourself always hitting down when you jump, so you're always butt stomping, which is not what you want to do. So he finds himself at a set of platforms where he's trying to progress on these platforms that you really can't float over. And he's getting frustrated. And he's like, Daddy, can you help me? I'm like, nope.
Good for you.
No, you have to do this.
I love this.
Now learning how to play games.
I love this.
I said, well, what you're doing, you keep hitting down and you keep butt stomping on the platform that's rotating and you're falling off.
Good for you.
You need, and I said, you're going to have to figure this out. And he was getting frustrated, but
that's good.
But he succeeded. He succeeded.
Yes.
And again, this is not easy with the wings, right? He doesn't need to get good. He's 5, but he learned the challenge, and he learned it in a safe environment that was easier. That was a more shallow onboarding. If he didn't have those wings, he would never get out of the first level. And guess what? It's a good thing he had them because now he's experiencing the game. He's enjoying himself. He is still learning.
He is supposed to feel these emotions. He's supposed to be stymied and frustrated. We got into this before you and I. Like, my kids can't have a second of boredom. They'll Dad, I'm bored. Do you remember that as a kid? Do you remember being bored?
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember being bored for hours?
Of course. Hours, interminable lengths of time.
I mean, yeah, like you're bored. You're drawing pictures. You're staring at the wall. You're playing checkers with Cheerios. That type of bored. I mean, bored. Yes. Yeah. Like bored.
Literally nothing to do and no one to do it with.
No one to run. Yeah, no devices. Nothing. It's just you and the walls. Like, and that's let them be, because that is where. Yeah. That is where creativity comes. That is where genius comes.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It's looking for those other options. And it's funny, I had a situation before this, might have been it was about 5 months ago. Yeah, in April, because my son was born in May. And he was playing Mario Kart, and he got like 3rd place, and he got pissed. Like, he got really frustrated. Like, I didn't win. And he like threw the controller on the couch. And I said, son, I'm sorry, buddy, but I don't think you can play video games anymore. He's like, what? I'm like, well, I don't think you're old enough because you got 3rd place. That's really good. Or
really good.
Maybe it was 5th place. Maybe 5th place. And you're like, well, you got 5th place. You beat like half the racers. You're not allowed to react like that. Like, you can't.
Yeah.
You can be frustrated. You can have that feeling, but you can't throw controllers and throw them around. So guess what? I'm sorry, son, but I don't think you can play video games until your birthday. You got to be 5 before you can play video games. I'm sorry. And he was crestfallen. Now, mind you, his birthday was like 3 weeks away. So I wasn't like removing half a year of games from him. It was calculated. This was a calculated move.
Yeah.
But I said,
tactical
you have to be
move.
5.
Yeah.
You got to be 5 before you play games. And he found something else to do for the next 3 weeks or 4 weeks.
Which is great.
And when he was 5, he was like, can I play again? Like, you're 5 now. But you're not allowed to get angry.
I love that story.
So it's just growth, man. So anyway, the point of that whole story is that this is just that accessibility, I think, is so important for kids to play. Next week, we talk in depth about this topic with Moses Norton, also known as the Well-Read Mage. It'll be about an hour's worth of audio that was cut from a 2.5-hour conversation. We really get into this pretty deeply and explore the topic of video game difficulty using Metroid Dread as that starting point. So please check it out. It's going to be a pretty interesting conversation. Wonderful topic for you as you do your holiday shopping online or in person. Thanks very much for listening to this edition of A Gamer Looks at 40. If you haven't already, it would be a great early Christmas present. I mean, really, just be fantastic. Going on Apple Podcasts and leaving a like or a review and a rating, all of that would be greatly appreciated. It would make me smile. It would give me the holiday feels right in the old cockles. Other than that, please tell a friend, tell people you know about this show. We all live in the retro gaming space, and we all have stories that deserve being told, and that's what I love doing on this show. So please tell a friend, like, rate, review, and subscribe on all the podcast things. I'm on Twitter. I'm also on Facebook. So if you have Facebook and you don't do the Twitter thing, you can find me there. I'm trying to be better about posting there. And that about does it. Thanks very much for listening to the show. Have a great week.